A couple of years ago, I made a video called The Power of Pursuit. And it was in large part about how pursuiters, Tyranitar, were able to, with good play, pursue everything. Not just dark weak Pokemon, not just physically frail dark neutral Pokemon, but even resists. All sorts of Pokemon you'd never peg for getting pursuited would get pursuited to great effect. And then earlier this year, I made a video which is kind of an extension of that, because it's called When Scarf Tyranitar Used to Rule the World. And yeah, a lot of those pursuits come from Scarf T-Tar threatening something slower and then forcing it out and then pursuing it for however much. But of course, that trick also worked on, band sets, utility sets, Mega T-Tar in Gen 6 and 7. But yeah, for Scarf sets in particular, that is our bridge from the original Pursuit video to the video we're making today. Because it wasn't just about pursuing everything, because those dominant team styles, which were held together by, great defensive core, but then if they faced like a big hard hitter like, I don't know, Kieran Black, then T-Tar would step in and check it somehow, because it just manages to check everything and pursue everything. That was the point of the previous thing, largely. Both the pursuit and the scarf of it all. So this video is an extension of that, because in the scarf video, I'm pretty sure, I mentioned how the really good players using this style, because this was the favored style for a long time of the most consistent, successful players of each era. And what they had in common was that they realized, hey, this playstyle lets me outplay pretty much everything. It lets me maximize my skill because I'm not caught off guard by whatever. I can check everything pretty decently, and if anything gets out of hand, Scarf T-Tar keeps it in check. So there was that, and that's especially that last part is relevant because the really good players recognized, hey, Scarf T-Tar kind of counters everything. So where we're going with this video is an extension of that, in that I was recently reminded through laddering for the Machamp Suspect test. I know, funny that it's about Machamp and this video is praising T-Tar's countering everything, but it's not just Scarf T-Tar that countered everything. It's every kind of T-Tar. And here's an example that used to be incredibly common. Here, a Tyranitar switches directly into a Starmie using a water move. It's not like the Starmie was going to go for like an Ice Beam or a Thunderbolt or something. It was staring down a Heatran. Theoretically, it could have T-bolted, but basically, with Starmie against Heatran, you are expecting the water move to come, especially because it prevents T-Tar from switching in safely. But this is exactly my point. Even though the T-Tar's coming in, it's a similar story with something as strong as Specs Latias. The T-Tar's coming in, you can hit it as hard as you want, it's still going to trap you. And here, Tyranitar is of course aided by Passho Berry, which was the standard for a very long time. Remains an amazing set, obviously. So it switches directly into one Hydro Pump, the one that's weakened, and then it proceeds to survive the second Hydro Pump and take the Starmie out. So goodbye Starmie, that's kind of big. So what you see here is a relic from a time where Tyranitar was everyone's water counter. Kingdra and Empoleon, I mean, at least those you hit really hard, but even something like Offensive Suicune, even something like Gyarados, because you say, oh, well, those are all special attackers. Yeah, and then you use your Passho Tar and survive a +1 Gyarados Waterfall, and you are just good to go. So basically, the idea of using Tyranitar to counter everything isn't just through resist berries. Obviously, that is nice, but it's so bulky that it doesn't even need it. I mean, T-Tar is also a lot of people's water counter even without the Passho Berry. A bulky band set, a defensive set, or, again, Scarf. I mean, that whole hard switch T-Tar into a Starmie Hydro Pump thing, that was done all the time with Scarf sets, because you live even a Life Orb Hydro, and then you can pick it off. And I'm getting a phone call that can wait. Oh my god. I already know what it's going to be, and it's something annoying. Anyway, it's not annoying? The way T-Tar can be customized to take on everything, not just in the team builder. I'm not talking specific scenarios, but with flexibility in the battle. And this is where your skill really shines, because I'll give you an example from another game. Actually, I'll pull that replay up after this one. So I'll get back to that example I had in mind. But It's obviously when I say counter, I don't mean T-Tar hard counters everything, right? But you do have situations where with T-Tar's immense flexibility, you switch it into all kinds of goofy stuff. And there you go. Like, for example, a fast Lumberry T-Tar with Fire Blast can switch into a Breloom Spore and chase it out. That's a ridiculous example, but like that's what I mean by in-game flexibility, because you can have your perfectly laid plans in the battle, or in the team builder, sorry, but then you'll notice that a lot of teams that rely on everything going perfectly according to plan, they are very poor at adapting to big threats they come across later on. And the big threats they come across, once things have taken damage, once the battle has started, really. Once they can no longer say, oh, well, at full health, X counters Y, well, you're not going to be at full health. Not just because of hazards, but just because of general damage taken, so you got to adapt. So that's where T-Tar steps in. You can do crazy things with T-Tar, like if you have a bulky choice band T-Tar, then you can pivot it into like a mixed Flygon, to use another DPP example, mixed Flygon Fire Blast, and well, it's bulky enough to survive an earthquake, so you have all sorts of options. I mean, the easy example is, oh, well, the Flygon's going to switch out, so you pursued it. But you can also double switch, exactly, if you don't want to risk it. You can counter it, not necessarily by countering it, but just by pivoting into it so well. Because, people do this all the time with switching into something like Mixed Dragonite, because you take Fire Blast beautifully, but you also soak Draco Meteor more than most other Pokemon are going to. So, you counter it, by forcing them to use a certain attack. Like, either they switch, and you can cover that with your switch, or they're going to Earthquake. And if you think they're going to stand in Earthquake and you want to take that hit, you can Crunch, and suddenly your T-Tar is countered Flygon. Now, of course, word of caution, you can't just haphazardly use T-Tar to counter everything, because if you you can do that T-Tar countering Flygon thing, but if you're relying on T-Tar to check Latias and nothing else on your team can step up against Latias, you might not want to do that. So, obviously, this comes with common sense and general caution and understanding of the metagame you're playing, and your own plan for the rest of the game. But, of course, if you do have that in mind, then you get to reap the infinite benefits of T-Tar countering everything in sight, and obviously you can adjust for this in the team builder too. But yeah, to go back to the Flygon example, even I just used the example of mixed Flygon, but I remember there was a period in like 2012 where it was a regular sight in tournaments where you would have a full health T-Tar against a Flygon, and the Flygon was obviously going to U-turn because it didn't want to stay in an earthquake, and the CB T-Tar would just about KO it, and with rocks it often would, with Pursuit on the switch, on the very obvious U-turn. It was utterly, utterly nuts. So there's that example. And another example from the same time period, people would keep their CB Tar incredibly healthy, at absolute full health, and it would wind up surviving a +2 Scizor Bullet Punch from bulky SD Scizor, not offensive, obviously. Because it would just have enough bulk with that old spread. It was like 184 HP, something like that. And you would just tank that 56 attack or 16 attack bulky SD Scizor at +2 and finish it off with Stone Edge. So that is a particularly nuts example. CB Tar countering SD Scizor. I would understand if it was like a Babiri Tar with Fire Blast, but this is another example of what I mean, where it just does insane things. And speaking of customizability and steals, I've also seen crazy things. I think I built with it once. I don't think I brought it to anything, but I know I've talked to other people too about like physically defensive T-Wave T-Tar in Oris. So with Passho Berry for Lopunny, so you can paralyze that, but it also works because you get to stay in on Mega Metagross and just tank the Meteor Mash. Obviously, and Hammer Arm is protected against by the Chople. But yeah, the Mash, it just bounces off, you T-Wave it, and you are good to go. So, because T-Tar's flexibility a lot of the time, because so much of its support is external through Sandstorm, then you also, to say nothing of the fact, yes, that T-Tar is countering a lot of things, quote-unquote countering, just by setting up Sand, which is why you see it switch into everything imaginable. But you also will have that flexibility in the moveset to say, okay, well, now what do I want it to answer? Because it can run so many moves, it can run so many items. I remember G80 or Gene, one of the advanced players I learned a lot from, he said, I don't even know if T-Tar learned Psychic, but if it did, you could use Psychic on T-Tar and it would still be good. So, yeah, speaking of T-Tar switching into things, I have seen, this is an advanced thing too, before it even gets the SpDef boost, you often see T-Tar switch into Suicune early on just to get the sand running. That's how effective it is. And in DPP, obviously, with the boost to its, what's it called? SpDef, then it gets even better. So, this next replay, I wanted to find and use for this purpose. I very well may have used for the Power Pursuit video because it's just such a stunning example. But, no, I don't want to go to week 2. But it bears worth repeating just as an example of, and I can use it to point out some other stuff. Yeah. I'm not as familiar with the intricacies of CB Tar in Gen 8, but I have to imagine. You know, I've seen games where, like, it threatens Heavy Slam on Clef, and suddenly here comes T-Tar switching into and countering a Fairy type. So, utterly nuts in that regard. And, I mean, I'm not just talking Scarf. I mean, okay, usually I am talking Scarf T-Tar, but I really like a set with Protect in DPP. Actually, I like a set with Protect in Advance too, but that's something else. But because in Advance, these Pokemon you're switching into are a lot likelier to carry Fighting. Or sorry, Leftover, so they're not getting worn down. But in DPP, if you're facing something like Infernape is the most obvious example, but even Machamp with a Lumberry, then I've had games where I switch T-Tar into Payback or Ice Punch, and I Protect on the Machamp, and it's losing sand, health from sand. And that's big, because that is what you are running, aiming for, wearing it down through passive damage. Where's that replay? Yeah, this one. This one is a beauty. We're not going to go through the whole thing turn by turn, obviously, but there's just an incredible sequence here where Trosco has a CB Tar, and a great team. ABR's team is very good too. But that one's more known because it gets used commonly. I think it had a couple of mirror matches in SPL, at least one. Anyway, so Fable is Moonblasting, and Jellicent taunts it. Here's Excadrill, Jellicent doing more great Jellicent stuff. Paralyzing the Serp, paralyzing Clef, paralyzing the Serp. Who knows what happened there? Torn-T pursuing or just threatening Tornadus Therian is... I mean, I don't want it to be an entirely reductive of the... Or sorry, redundant alongside the Power Pursuit video, because that made that point, you know, very, very clear. But it is astonishing, you know, not just Pursuit, just how many matchups T-Tar flips, you know, just by being at good health and having the bulk to take anything on, almost. And that's why I brought up the Sword and Shield example, because it can't, you know, take advantage of its switch-ins with Pursuit anymore there, yet I would imagine it functions very similarly. And if I'm wrong, please tell me. So here it comes into Slowbro. CB Tar, incidentally, is the reason why Slowbro is not a reliable Machamp answer in DPP. Because, you know, you can just get pursued by it. Yeah, Slowbro can live 1, but it doesn't do so comfortably. So, things happen. We're going to skip ahead a little bit here. Oh, in case you missed what happened on that turn, Gliscor switches in and gets crit, which is very unfortunate. Anyway, here comes Excadrill. I think it's the Rocker. Yes, it is. So, Perma Hazards, Scalds, the one nice thing it does. So, T-Tar, Burn, great playing from Trosco just in general. I mean, see, even that, I mean, that was a great example. You know, let's go back to that. You know, just not even with the intent. I mean, he kind of did it earlier with just the sand, but now with the burn, it's a really great move because he doesn't want to stay in and get T-waved and or to, get scald burned. But he's just switching T-Tar in just to, quote unquote, again, I'm using the word counter loosely here, but he counters pretty much everything with it, just for the extra chip damage. Maybe he can provoke a switch, maybe not. But, remember earlier that example of, staying on the mixed Flygon and take it out, or, switch out and you've kind of countered it because you have forced it into the obvious move this time around, because you don't want to mess around with mixed Flygon against a T-Tar that has a possibility of staying in. Obviously, game factors complicate that. I'm speaking in broad, fairly generalized terms, but you get the idea. But yeah, the same idea here. You can threaten the Slowbro, or you can just switch out to Jellicent and kind of be okay either way. So, here comes the big one. Scizor, Mega Scizor, U-turns out with a a nice crit for sure, because of what's about to happen. But the CB-Tar here is carrying Ice Punch, which is known on Aura's CB-Tar, or was at the time. I don't know if that's changed. So this is a Tank Garchomp. It doesn't come close to taking the T-Tar out. And so the CB-Tar, slower than Tank Garchomp, is now being used to answer the Tank Garchomp. The fact that it's about to pursuit it is almost besides the point. Even if I had just forced it out, would have been... Okay, I guess the crit was quote-unquote meaningless insofar as the Chomp still was going to be in range of a +2 Scizor or Bullet Punch after this, I'm fairly certain. Especially with rocks, yeah. But yeah, incredible pursuit there. Even not just getting the KO against a physically bulky, dark neutral Pokemon. Goodness gracious. But yeah, that was basically the whole idea, that T-Tar counters everything, and I just thought of this replay because it's just astonishing. So here comes Chomp, and no full para. And here comes T-Tar again with para support. I mean, CB-Tar just becomes absolutely ridiculous. As a breaker, as a supporter, as a counter to things. Yeah, so that's basically everything. So, we're just going to watch this play out quickly. And, yeah, that is everything I wanted to say on the subject. I'm sure I can always add to it more in the future. But if you have further interest in the subject, I would recommend just going to your favorite tournament players' games in relevant generations and watch how they use T-Tar, because the really great players know that T-Tar, I mean, when I say counter everything, I don't mean switch it into Iron Valiant or whatever. But it does have that unbelievable flexibility where with Sand, with Pursuit, I mean, even without Pursuit, just the Sand, and being able to check things. But even in matchups like the mixed Flygon one, or the Tank Garchomp one that we just saw, then you get to see that the Sand doesn't really do anything, almost. It's just, because in that situation it's staring down a ground type. So, yeah. God, you know what I've seen? I've seen T-Tar, Zero Bulk T-Tar withstand a +1 Waterfall from DD Kingdra. Now, that's because DD Kingdra is weak as hell, but you get the idea. Or I've also seen T-Tar the Gyarados counter. I mean, on my stall team from DPP that I really got to make that video about, I used to change the set all the time based on what I wanted to counter. I'd use Roar, I'd use Taunt. That I was going to say Super Fang, but I was like, no, I'm thinking I might need a Queen. But the fact is, it started out as a Spadef T-Tar, and eventually I made it max defense with things like Toxic or Counter, and I was countering, not literally, but sometimes literally, things like CB Pert or Gyarados, DD and CB alike. So I was using, I mean, it sounds ridiculous, right? But it really, really worked. It helped out against annoying things like Flygon, helped out against Dragonites of all sorts. Just generally useful, it could stomach like a CB Scizor, or not even a CB Scizor, like all sorts of Scizor U-turns. Yeah, I mean, obviously T-Tar is generally going to be getting used in efforts to counter special attackers, but it's just as capable of or not just capable, but also very capable of taking on physical attackers. Obviously, its typing is not so conducive to it, but the bulk is what's really superb about it. So, yeah, that is basically it. We're just watching Scizor go. Look at, well, here it. Oh man, I forgot that happened. Whew, wow. So that's the game. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I'll see you in the next one.